This is Fort Moultrie in Sullivan's Island, South Carolina. A very significant historical event took place here on June 28, 1776. There was a small unit of the Continental Army here guarding the entrance to Charleston Harbor, and they got word that the British were coming with a fleet of ships coming from, I believe, from Boston. And the British had 280 guns. There were 28 guns here with this small Continental force with very, very limited ammunition. They got word that the British were on the way, so they hastily built a fort, not the fort you see here today. They hastily built a fort out of the palmetto trees here, which was the only building material they had readily at hand. And they built the walls up like this, came back 16 feet, built a second wall filled in between with beach sand to provide a buffer against these British cannons. Well, they only had time to complete the fort on 3 sides before the British attacked on June 28th. It's a big battle. The British found out that the palmetto logs could withstand the cannonballs. They didn't splinter like the pine forest might have. They just sort of, because it's a spongy wood, sort of sucked up the cannonballs, and it did not fall. So this is a very narrow spit of land here. It's one of the barrier islands, and they realized, you know what? If we sail around the backside, we can attack from that unprotected third side. So as the British fleet, the first ship was the Action, tried to come around the point there, right behind me, they got stuck on a sandbar and blocked the channel. They had to actually scuttle that ship to keep it from falling into Patriot hands. Well, then the British tried to land on an adjoining island and attack with a marine landing force, but they had some bad intel about that as well, and were not able to ford what is now called Breach Inlet to keep them from coming over on this part of the island. So at any rate, they were unable to bombard the fort from the front. They were unable to come around the backside, which incidentally was being guarded by a battalion of men from North Carolina under the command of Colonel Francis Nash, one of my ancestors. They couldn't come around the backside. They couldn't land from the adjoining island. So they loaded up and went back home to Britain. And there was a London newspaper that reported on the events and said that anyone that looked at the events of Sullivan's Island and did not believe that God Almighty was on the side of the brave colonists, well, that person would have to be an atheist. Well, interestingly enough, this was one of the first major, maybe the first major continental victory in the war. A courier went to Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, where the First Continental Congress was in session. And when they got word that I'll take that back, it would be the Second Continental Congress was in session. When they got word of this major Patriot victory here at Fort Moultrie, they were so encouraged that they actually signed the Declaration of Independence a few days later. This was a pivotal point in the development and the establishment of our nation. And the point I want to make here is that these men that were stationed here were terribly outgunned. Any military strategist that was looking at this would say that they had no reason to try to make this stand. They should have just laid down their arms and surrendered. But these men didn't do that. And as a result, there was a powerful and major historical victory that took place right here. We can learn a lot from this as well when it comes to moral courage. The courage and the boldness to stand for what is true and right and just. We do this in law enforcement all the time. And might I say, not only making stands for what is true and right and just, but also for what is constitutional. We're being challenged in many different areas today on the constitutionality of different laws, of different executive orders, of different judicial rulings. And our founders understood that there would be some tension, some interplay between the federal government and the states, between the different branches of the government when it came to these constitutional issues. And as law enforcement officers today, we must be schooled in these constitutional principles so that we know when we need to make a stand against unconstitutional intrusions, unconstitutional actions from other governmental entities. So I want us to be encouraged by the actions of these brave men at Fort Moultrie and know that even when it looks like we might not win, we need to be willing to make a stand for what is true, right, just, and constitutional.